Serial escalation is something that comes with the territory of moving into a saga. Love or hate it, power creep is a natural part of this process when it comes to a series, and when handled right, it's actually able to be a good thing. The same holds true for characters who are considered or labeled overpowered. Despite the poor reputation that this term generally has, largely because of video games where something is an over-centralizing part of the metagame, and has long since just become a byword for a character people don't like, both in video games or other medias, as a cheap way of throwing shade on them without having to actually say a reason beyond their own personal pettiness. Something that I do plan and hope to cover in a future dedicated video just on that trope itself, but today's video is just specifically on Godzilla, and more specifically, monsterverse Godzilla. As characters who are considered overpowered often have the story written in such a way that their overpoweredness is more or less a non-factor. If they're going up against some sort of opposition, the opposition will generally be on a similar caliber to them. Just as strong, just as durable, just as powerful, able to take their hits and dish them back. Which itself does require very good writing to make it feel natural, as well as a deep understanding by the writers and the creators of the strengths, limitations, and capabilities of such characters, in addition to a more clever interpretation being putting them in a circumstance where maybe they aren't able to use the full extent of their powers for reasons that would feel natural, not contrived to the point where it is glaringly obvious to the fans that a character is being throttled deliberately. If this is handled poorly, however, it can lead to a degeneration of the series, a flurry of inconsistencies beginning to pop up, and, worst of all, runaway power creep, when power creep becomes a bad thing. This is something that the Monsterverse was actually very good about doing, and only recently has it begun to go into this more aggressive and deliberately enforced power creep. Hello everyone, I am Max Allo, your American Allosaurus. And today we are actually not going to be talking about Godzilla's actual physical combat prowess. This actually has a lot more to do with his sensory capabilities rather than his out-and-out combat potential, though that is something we're going to be covering. So if you love the kaiju content we do, and really a lot of the other stuff we do around here, don't forget to subscribe for more. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. It helps please the algorithmic gods that rule our lives. And yeah, like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. So, on to the... Honestly, the Monsterverse has done a lot of really interesting things with Godzilla early on. And it is legitimately impressive that Godzilla, this, again, nigh-on invulnerable, unstoppable, almost force, like, literal force of nature and basically physical god, which in really any other context, again, would go that overpowered moniker, has really not gone into this. Because, again, of his out-and-out physical combat capabilities. This, again, like we mentioned earlier, is because when he is put up against a threat, it is of comparable power to him. But those inconsistencies and those problems come in with his sensory capabilities, which arguably have begun to destroy almost any ability for them to convincingly set up a plot in the Monsterverse. The reason for this is Godzilla's basically omnisense capabilities. He doesn't just have good hearing, good smell, good sight, good any of this. He can, prior to King of the Monsters, more or less the oceans were almost a sort of an extension of himself. He could feel the motion of things in the ocean and was able to locate if something was going wrong, but he still had to rely on his predatory hunting capabilities, much like, again, see at the start of Godzilla 2014, where he needed to hunt the Muto specifically, waiting for it to release its call, to locate it, then go in for the attack. He couldn't just homing beacon locate the Hakamuto and destroy it before it was hatched. He needed to wait, stalk. As of ending of King of the Monsters, this has since changed, with Mothra sacrificing Godzilla absorbing Mothra's energy. His sensory capabilities were ramped up to an insane degree. When I say insane degree, I am talking Godzilla is able to sense anything moving, the air, the water, the earth. He is aware of everything going on. He can feel the lives and the deaths of anything happening anywhere around the world. He's aware of what is going on in the inner earth. He is capable of distinguishing and tracking creatures by their footsteps, and is able to locate with pinpoint precision things that are moving, things that are broadcasting for a brief time period, and get their exact location, and pursue and hunt them down. So yes, Godzilla would be able to hear you jorking it to Cottontail VA's ASMR. This is basically Toph's seismic sense from Avatar, ramped up to an absurd degree, because again, this doesn't just act for land. This is the air, this is the water, this is the inner earth. He knows where everything is going on. He can read your footsteps. Plus, the frickin' Byakugan from Naruto and like Daredevil's Giga Hearing. Godzilla knows everything that is happening on Earth at a given time. This means that Godzilla could quite literally have gone through the entirety of Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla Kong: The New Empire blindfolded. Why is this a problem for setting up conflict? Because it means that Godzilla would have been entirely aware of every single thing that Scar King was doing in the inner earth. He knew exactly where Shima was, he knew exactly what Scar King was trying to do when it came to escaping, and he didn't do anything. It also makes it a lot harder to actually write a convincing battle, and this is something that I actually seem to forget about when it comes to battles in Godzilla vs. Kong, Godzilla Kong: The New Empire itself. We have that one part in Godzilla vs. Kong where Kong takes the crane and throws it against a building to try and distract Godzilla. This is the same Godzilla that could locate with just unimpeded accuracy Kong being sedated and transported on a boat in the middle of the ocean and ambush him, who could track every single Apex Cybernetics facility that was working on a component of Mechagodzilla because of the brief Kevin signal flaring up when it was in use. But he could not tell a giant monkey was jumping on a building and presently camping out 100 feet behind and above him. It also means that the scene in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire where Kong goes, surprise, pocket sand, throws it right in Godzilla's eyes, one, that shouldn't have affected him, because if grains of sand are bothering Godzilla, why do bullets and missiles not bother him? I get it's for a rule of cool, but one, it ultimately makes no sense that one, sand would be able to scratch and hurt Godzilla's eyes, and two, that it would even disorient him in the first place, because Godzilla's other senses allow him to locate literally everything on the world without needing to physically see it. If anything, his sight is probably his worst sense, because your smell is linked to your taste, and of course hearing and just basically telepathic seismic sensing literally everything on Earth. He would know exactly where Kong is. Obviously, yes, I understand the reason why they don't have these abilities come into play during an actual battle itself, because a fight where Godzilla is aware of everything going on around him leaves no suspense. Kong quite literally cannot counterattack, there's no sneaking up on him. And that's the problem. This is a sign of bad writing, that they are ignoring or just outright forgetting abilities that Godzilla has access to. It's that they are bringing up and having abilities be there when it is convenient for the plot, and then just completely disposing of them when it's inconvenient for the plot. And I will say, I do legitimately believe that monsterverse Godzilla has gone into that overpowered territory, because a lot of this means you can't have a brewing enemy problem that has been lurking for thousands of years waiting to strike, and have Godzilla just have done nothing about it. We know Godzilla is a very proactive character. It leads to inconsistencies in his characterization, and well, why would he just not do this when his job is preserving the balance? I think part of this, especially the part with Scar King and Shimo, extends to the fact that I will die on this hill. I believe that Godzilla Kong the New Empire was two separate movies smashed together. It was supposed to be a solo Kong movie, and we could have a Godzilla versus Tiamat solo film, and then they just had to smash two together and ditch Tiamat because Kong can't swim, and then they created Shimo in a place, which again creates a whole bunch of problems. But that's for a whole separate schizo video. Because as for his overall combat capability potential, Godzilla has been remarkably consistent, and as mentioned before, characters will naturally grow and become stronger throughout their journey. This is basically the hero's journey as a whole. In most media, you have your character at the start of the journey, video games, TV shows, whatever. They're not strong, they're not skilled, they will grow, they learn. Of course, in video games is best illustrated by a sort of a boss rush gauntlet to show how far your character has come in that time. Mini bosses, or heck, even full-out stage bosses that earlier plagued you and were difficult, later on become nothing more than regular mooks for you to just run over, maybe with slightly more difficulty than the other surrounding mooks. With regards to longer-standing media franchises, this is often displayed by characters being able to overcome opponents that normally they couldn't. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles does this very well with at the start. The Shredder absolutely demolishes the four turtles, with only the Master Splinter really being able to fight him one-on-one, and throughout the series, gradually they become more able to go from absolutely getting wiped the floor from the Shredder to being able to fight and not get completely obliterated, to being able to eventually defeat him. Things like Ben 10, Ben later mastering each of the different aliens in the Omnitrix. While this normally would not really apply super well to Godzilla, given that we're actually encountering Godzilla not anywhere near the start of his journey. In fact, Godzilla is a several 100,000 to potentially millions of years old ancient being that has been fighting for pretty much just as long. And they do a very good job of illustrating Godzilla's combat prowess and capabilities with very good consistency. This is because of the nature of the opponents he goes up against, befitting the fact that Godzilla is seen and presented in the monsterverse as an almost physical god. Most of his opponent monsters are forces of nature or acts of God themselves, in a sense. The Muto are essentially a living famine. The sheer number of them would overwhelm the world and deplete resources by just consuming everything. King Ghidorah is a sentient superstorm, a massive hurricane, thunderstorm, weather-caused destruction. Even Mechagodzilla, to an extent, falls into this, being an imperfect attempt by humanity at harnessing and trying to control this power that we do not fully understand. Tiamat herself had many capabilities of controlling water, essentially making her almost a living tsunami. A large part of why I feel the fight at the end of GXK was in Rio is that was where Godzilla and Tiamat were going to have their eventual showdown. And despite all of the issues I actually have with Shimo's introduction, as a concept, she actually fits into this perfectly. More or less, she is a walking ice age. The problem largely stemming from her implementation, and thus actually being the inciter of this massive ramp-up in actual combat power creep Godzilla has taken, by being this arbitrarily bigger, stronger, or more powerful, thing that actually is basically a white version of Godzilla that walks on four legs. This ratcheted up to the extreme when it wasn't really necessary. And once again, Godzilla was aware she was an unwilling prisoner of Scar King for all these thousands of years and didn't go and rescue her. That, again, writing-wise, I get they want to do Rule of Cool, but this is what I mean when I say a very poor understanding of and implementation of power creep results in a story no longer making sense and beginning to degenerate and unravel. As the arbitrary introduction of Shimo forced Godzilla to, after he defeated Tiamat, to absorb power from Tiamat, and if you look very closely on a lot of the monitors in GXK, You can see that after absorbing the power from Tiamat, his spines go to 20 times energy storage capacity. I'm going to break down just a roundabout of what that actually means. We know Godzilla had to use a sustained and very frequent use of his atomic ray to burrow the hole into the hollow earth to fight Kong and Hong Kong. If let's just say that that atomic ray burst was a minute long. You know, one charge up, one storage was 1 minute. 20 times, that would be a 20-minute long atomic ray blast. Yeah. With respect to how the monsterverse prior would have done power creep, the baseline was actually set by the Muto, and it actually is made very clear in the beginning of the monsterverse that Godzilla is actually more than a match for either of the Muto individually. The male Muto is actually constantly on the run from Godzilla. Upon Godzilla confronting him in Honolulu, the male Muto frickin' breaks for it. He was only grabbing a snack from a Russian Akula, and then Godzilla showed up. The only time in the movie the male Muto directly goes confrontation with Godzilla is when their nest has been made, and it is more or less a final stand to protect the young. Even the much larger, much more powerful female Muto is actually helpless in a one-on-one contest against Godzilla. He easily shoves her around, bullies her, and just generally curb stomps her. It is because the two of them are working together, they are able to have a chance against Godzilla, the male Muto striking with quicker, faster hits, and while Godzilla is distracted by the male Muto, the larger, more powerful female Muto goes in for bulldozing body slams. And this is all layered on top of the fact that they have naturally evolved defenses against several of Godzilla's capabilities. However, these are not perfect, as even though their armor is designed to deal with Godzilla's atomic ray, they still feel it. Even the Muto Prime, a far further developed variant of them, and armor that is far more heavily, developed, still feels a significant amount of the pain from the atomic ray blast. King Ghidorah. Godzilla had actually already defeated King Ghidorah in the past. We're actually told this outright. That's the reason Ghidorah is frozen in the ice. So, a pre-Godzilla 2014 Godzilla defeated Ghidorah in the past. Now, yes, there may have been some Mothra's assistance. We don't get a whole lot of battling in Antarctica itself. It more or less amounts to a quick draw fight with Godzilla going for an atomic ray burst, and Ghidorah firing back with his gravity beams, knocking Godzilla into the crater. And then Ghidorah just flies off because Ghidorah wants a 1v1. Ghidorah's own pride is why he leaves. And later on, when Godzilla ambushes Ghidorah after Rodan has escaped, Godzilla was actually... It has been confirmed that Godzilla would have actually won that fight, because Godzilla drags Ghidorah underwater, rips off Kevin 1.0. Had the military not screwed up and fired the Action Destroyer, Godzilla would have actually killed Ghidorah there. While Ghidorah may be seen as a power creep addition in that, he is able to fly, he has more power capabilities than, of course, the Muto, both Godzilla and Ghidorah have their own respective elemental advantage locations. Godzilla, of course, in the water, Ghidorah in the air, and on land. They're more or less even. This is the reason why Ghidorah in the final battle in Boston, post-Godzilla receiving a rejuvenating nuclear explosion from Dr. Serizawa, spends the entire fight, at least towards the start, on the ground. This is because Ghidorah's own ego is what is driving him to fight and defeat Godzilla on Godzilla's terms, to restore his own ego. He wants to not defeat Godzilla, but humiliate him. And when Ghidorah realizes that, one, this new, somewhat empowered Godzilla is not only a match for him, but more than a match, we actually see him losing his cool. He is calm, he is collected. We even see at one point when they're doing the rush to each other at the start of the fight, Ghidorah almost looks like he's trying to lift off and fly into the air, and then corrects himself by pushing himself back down. He starts losing it when he grabs onto the generator, doing the massive electric burst, doing the flying jump grab. He chooses not to use his more devastating abilities to, again, humiliate Godzilla, and only after he is shown without a shadow of a doubt he can't win this way. He goes into using his own abilities, which ultimately spell his own doom. Had he not tried to drag the fight out, make it slow, make it painful, he could have easily killed Godzilla and not allowed time for Mothra's energy to be absorbed into him, stabilize the runaway nuclear action, because Godzilla was the entire time controlling a runaway nuclear meltdown inside of him because it overclocked him when Serizawa detonated the nuke. Mothra's energy stabilized him, because he also expelled most, if not all of this, during the thermonuclear pulse that he used twice to vaporize Ghidorah. Thus, right there, easily capable of returning Godzilla back to his baseline levels. Now, again, this is kind of where the power creep somewhat began starting, because now Godzilla is able to locate basically everything on the Earth. This, I do think, was the sort of the start of it, and that's why there is some power creep with respect to the Wingard saga starting, and I think it would have been better to leave this out, because I don't think it was necessary to give Godzilla the super mega omnisense in order to, of course, quell everything. And just have had it be, well, Godzilla's able to locate it because he can just hear, or just has good hearing. Because again, the same ability, because he was able to locate the Muto from thousands of miles away. Easy explanation would have been just the same thing done with the boats that were transported, because he knows where Skull Island is. And Mechagodzilla himself actually is a de-escalation of this, because Mechagodzilla is actually weaker. The only reason that Mechagodzilla stood a chance against both Godzilla and Kong is both of them were exhausted. Godzilla had been swimming all around the world locating Apex Cybernetics facilities to try and destroy the Kevin signal. He had just burrowed that massive hole to the inner Earth in the middle of Hong Kong, went 2 rounds with Kong, one of which he actually killed Kong, and now he had to go fight Robo-Kevin. He was just tired. Which again has also been confirmed. That was the reason why Mechagodzilla was able to manhandle Godzilla as easily as he did, but he was just exhausted. At full strength, Godzilla would have wiped the floor with him. Maybe he would have been a threat to Kong. Maybe. But then we get Scar King and Shimo, and the reason why Shimo is as ramped up overstacked for power as she is largely the result of Scar King being so deliberately underwhelming in the combat department, which on its own non-action big bad idea I don't think is terrible, but when it comes to a kaiju whose entire personality is the fact that he can order around a legion of other monsters to fight for him and is himself a giga coward, could work if they actually had him fight, because they really don't. We never actually get to see this side of Scar King, and they just separate him from his legions almost immediately, and then Shimo is just there. Which again, a whole host of issues involving the entire setup-based concept of GXK that entirely conflict with the monster versus, core identity, which is probably going to be its own whole separate video. But most of GXK's problems do stem from the fact that Godzilla, because of those mega ramped up senses that he did acquire at the end of King of the Monsters, stayed. And were, expanded upon into going into detailing what they are, and then later movies not really remaining consistent with them. Sort of picking and choosing times where, oh yeah, he can tell where all this stuff is, and then other times where he can't tell what's going on. And the more worrying part is, despite the fact that Wingard has now departed the monsterverse, Evolved Godzilla is an intermediate stage. This isn't his final form, and they really ramped up his power. So he has unfortunately crossed over into that legitimately overpowered territory, because you have a character that can see, hear, smell, just sense footsteps across the entire planet. This is a genuine question to you, the audience. How do you set up an opponent to that, where Godzilla will know you're coming beyond just like, oh, this thing has sensory canceling out capabilities where you just can't detect it, because that is a contrived explanation. Just, oh, I'm just immune to detection. How do you convincingly make a story and convincingly write a battle where one character can sense all of your movements when you're attacking, when you're sleeping, when you're doing anything. Like, at the very least with Superman, he can't see through lead. He, of course, has kryptonite, which I think is, again, a bit of a cop-out at times. There are ways of disarming, to a degree, someone like Superman, but how do you disarm, like, Godzilla when he can, again, what has, like, borderline precognition at this point? I kind of hope, like, one thing I kind of hope that they do is, like, I don't know, like, some DNA virus, whatever the sort, like, latches onto Godzilla, and it, like, purges, like, the Mothra abilities and the Tiamat DNA from his body, and, like, absorbs it into create Orga or something like that, and it just returns Godzilla to base form Godzilla. Because I do believe that they have legitimately gotten Godzilla to a point where the only way to create a story is to have those moments of what did the writer just forget about this powers, or are they deliberately avoiding these powers, or do they have to retcon away these powers existing? And retconning is a very dangerous slope. I am not a fan of retcons. I probably make a whole video on the massive danger of them to a series as a whole. And I mean, I am looking forward to Supernova. But it's also a bit of a cautious worry in that these were things that I noticed with GXK, and they did kind of suck me out of the experience as I'm like, I mean, obviously it's great to watch Godzilla. You know, we like Godzilla because we like watching, you know, a giant atomic dinosaur suplex a giant monkey or three-headed space dragon through skyscrapers. It's freaking glorious. But at the same time, you like a series because you like the continuity, you like the consistency. And, you know, seeing just stuff be picked and chosen and tossed out can kind of disrupt that immersion. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure no one is watching at this point. But if you guys have, you know, thank you. You know, don't forget to subscribe, you know, comment your thoughts below, and, you know, leave a like. But I am kind of just rambling at this point. But of course, I've been Max Allo. Thank you very much for watching. In the next couple of weeks, there may be some videos are probably going to be a bit light going forward, because I will be going to the HoloLive concert in New York City. So my usual days of working on the videos will be unavailable, because of course I know preparing there, and, you know, got to work around my work schedule. So I'll figure out what to do for them. Probably in 2 weeks, I will be putting up the next reading passage from my kaiju stories. I've been wanting to get back to doing those, and I mean, I'll see you guys then. May the future. I mean, you guys will know when we do. You guys, I mean, I'm just making it up as I go. I only project the illusion of knowing what I'm doing. I've been Max Allo, and long live the Kaiju K.